Alright, thanks for coming back to Shooting It Straight. The content today will focus on a few currently popular training techniques. But as you've heard me say many times before, many standard shooting techniques taught today are may not be suited well for defensive shooting. Now, the following techniques that I'm about to go over here, they're fine techniques for casual target shooting, or maybe even for competitive shooting. However, when it comes to defensive shooting, it's an entirely different matter. All right, defensive shooting is in a category all by itself, and it calls for techniques that are unique to that specific action, as opposed to being a generic method applied to all shooting categories or groups. Now, much of this is due to the psychological, physiological, and natural instinctive survival responses that we have that take place during a deadly force incident, but do not take place in target or competitive shooting events. That's a big difference, and that makes a big difference, because now I realize that several of my videos tend to repeat certain points, and I'm certain you'll see some of that in this video today. But after having spent many years as a certified police trainer myself, I can say that most people understand and retain information much better after being repeatedly exposed to it, which is why I often repeat certain things in my videos. I think most of you can understand that. So, let's get started. And here are some currently popular training techniques that are taught universally to everybody, including defensive shooters. And I think we need to question that. Now, the first thing is, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this particular topic because there seems to be an awful lot of confusion and misunderstanding here with many trainers today. We're talking about focus on the front sight. Okay, now we hear this in almost every training video, including defensive shooting videos. Except from a concealed carrier and most other close-range defensive shooting perspectives, this is an inappropriate practice method, I think. Now, it's fine for longer shots where accuracy can start to become a valid concern and the threat is not so close or immediate. That's the time for that type of shooting. But remember, we're discussing private citizen self-defense incidents here, where distances are rarely more than 5 to 7 yards out, and the event is unexpected and sudden. Okay, we're not talking about a SWAT member trying to take out a threat at 30 plus yards away. We're not talking about military ground fighting here. And we're not talking about the infamous New York Police Department stakeout squad and their shootings. There's a difference in the training and the techniques used between each of these, simply because the core missions and circumstances of each are different. What we're talking about right here is we're talking about concealed carry self-defense, which is close up and within 10 yards usually. It's sudden and it's an immediate event. Right then and there is when it's happening in your face. And it also involves about 85% of concealed carriers who have had very little, if any, real training beyond the basic CCW class they took. Now, front sight focus is one of several basic techniques taught in the classic target shooting discipline. It is not a self-defense shooting technique, yet the majority of trainers are teaching this to concealed carry students as if there were no other options available. We see it in nearly every training video out there, And I think this is inappropriate training for concealed carriers. Look, they're being trained to practice a technique that they will probably never be able to perform in a real-life defensive shooting situation once those survival instincts kick in. That's going to change all that. I hate to burst any balloons or anything, but when suddenly attacked, keyword, suddenly attacked by an offender inside of about 10 yards distance or so, you will be focused on that attacker and nothing else, certainly not on your sights. This is a natural built-in survival response, but as I said, at a greater distance where the threat is somewhat less than immediate, you might then be able to focus on your sights, but then your self-defense claim may be questioned. Now, of course, that depends on circumstances. So, front sight focus for concealed carriers? No. Instead, I recommend that you practice looking at your target or your attacker, which is called threat-focused shooting. Threat-focused shooting. I suggest you practice that whenever shooting from eye level and inside of 10 yards or so, and by using the flash sight picture technique, especially if the threat is moving toward you, because that's most likely going to happen in real life anyway, since it's likely to be a sudden event and in a close proximity. Okay. FBI research statistics and studies have shown that about 80% of law enforcement officer gunfights happen inside of 21 feet or 7 yards. Private studies from private entities show that private citizen self-defense cases are normally inside of 5 yards or 15 feet. Look, you're just not going to be able to focus on the sights at all at that distance and in a sudden attack. And as I've mentioned before, if the gun is brought up to eye level, you should use the flash sight picture shooting technique, because there's no way in hell you'll be able to aim. And we know that aiming is closing one eye and lining up the sights, like shooting a bullseye target 40 yards away. You won't do that at all. But now, for whatever reason, trainers today have forgotten about or have never heard of the flash sight picture shooting technique. They instead simply refer to it as point shooting. But then, all shooting involves pointing, does it not? Now, from a technique aspect, point shooting does not involve using the sights at all. It's described by Fairbairn and Sykes in the early 1900s, point shooting is. It was Colonel Jeff Cooper who developed, labeled, and taught the flash sight picture shooting technique. And I believe that was back in the early 70s when he did that. Maybe late 60s. Now here, with the here, threat focused, your target is in focus, because your target is your threat, so it's in focus. And your sights, although you will be able to see an image of them, well, they're going to be fuzzy or hazy, okay, and out of focus. You should still reference the image of those sights, though. What you're looking to try to see is that white front sight, or front sight, whatever color it is, flash up on your target, center mass. That's your go switch right there. When that front sight, when you get the image of that front sight landing in the A zone, that's when you hit the gas. All right, try that focus method on a light switch or a wall clock or something like that, and you'll see what I mean. Using this method, landing effective shots on target at distances inside of 5 to 7 yards, should present no problems at all, while still allowing you to focus on your threat, which is what you're going to naturally be doing anyway, at that distance and under those circumstances. So if you want to dramatically increase your chances of surviving a deadly force encounter, practice point shooting and practice flash sight picture shooting. while focusing on the threat, not the sights, the threat. All right, makes sense? All right, number 2, trigger control. Slow, methodical, smooth trigger pulls, and then releasing only to reset, only to the reset point. Have you heard that? Again, this is a basic technique taught to and intended for target shooters. In a real-life deadly force situation, you'll be yanking that bang switch as fast as possible. Believe me. And you'll never even think about the trigger reset point. And the weird part of it is that none of that stuff will even matter anyway. Again, slow, methodical, and smooth is how you pull the trigger when shooting at a beer can sitting on a fence post some 40 yards away. Not when an attacker is 15 feet away from you and charging at you with a knife. I know, but won't that make the muzzle move? Yeah, but not nearly enough to throw the shot off target. At 30 yards, yeah, but inside of 10 yards, no, don't worry about it. As I mentioned before, it's not trigger pull that throws your shots off course. It's your grip strength, how much strength you're able to get on that grip. It's flinching and it's timing. That's what causes you to go off target. It's not your trigger pull. And shoot to reset, why? In a chaotic event like a gunfight, what if you fail to allow the trigger to return forward enough to reset? Well, your gun won't fire then, that's what. Is saving 1/100th of a second really worth that risk? Just let it go fully forward and don't worry about the shoot to reset bullshit. All right, taking aim. Remember we talked about aim. Sorry, that's not going to be possible in 99% of self-defensive shooting. Again, though, distance plays a part here, and in some applications, you can do that. Aiming is closing one eye and lining up the sights. If the attack is up close and sudden, you will not be able to close an eye in order to aim. It's just not possible. Our natural instinct prevents us from doing that as a survival mechanism. Our instinct is to keep both eyes wide open and on our threat, not on our sights, not closing one eye. At greater distances, however, the threat is not so immediate. This may then allow a person to close an eye and take proper aim. Cops do it all the time in hostage or barricaded situations, even with their service pistol. But to think you'll be able to aim or focus on the front sight when a bad guy is closing in on you with a knife or a bat is just fantasy. All right, almost done. Speed. Ah, yes, one of the most overemphasized aspects of all shooting. And where does speed fit into self-defense shooting? Well, nowhere actually, except perhaps in the draw to first shot on target practice, which is important. And that can be very important in some situations. And of course, most people think that lightning fast follow-up shots are cool, naturally, and have been taught to believe that you cannot possibly win a gunfight if you can't spit dozens of tiny bullets out like a machine gun. This is utter bullshit, and it always has been. Surviving a gunfight has nothing to do with blazing speed, nor with precise shooting. It's more about staying on top of the basic fundamentals of defensive shooting, having a plan of action, knowing when to execute that plan, being mentally prepared, understanding tactics, and things of that nature. Now, on the other hand, you cannot be sluggish in speed, nor can you be grossly inaccurate and expect to survive a gunfight. You have to have some speed, and you have to have at least combat accuracy. I know I've said it before, but you don't need to pull the trigger any faster than what is required to quickly fire a revolver. Just practice being quick from the holster and landing solid hits on that paper plate at reasonable distances. All right? And number 5, hang on. Number 5, Accuracy. The second of the two most overstressed and trite shooting techniques today is on accuracy. Everyone on YouTube seems to have invented never-ending practice drills geared toward pinpoint accuracy. Naturally, all in under a second. That's fine for competitors. Now, accuracy is important, but to a degree. Okay. From a self-defensive use of a handgun, you certainly don't need to achieve 2-inch groups. And I don't like to waste my time and ammo shooting at 3x5 index cards. It's just not at all realistic. Once again, we're not target shooters, so those skills are not needed. Focus on the skills that are needed. All you really ever need is what's known as combat accuracy. Combat accuracy is not concerned with the size of your groups. It's not concerned with your ability to carefully pick off a beer can 40 yards away, and it has nothing to do with how fast you shoot. It's only concerned with your ability to put a few effective shots into a paper plate size area, which is about 8 inches, from within a particular distance, usually a few yards. In self-defense applications, that distance is normally inside of 15 feet, maybe 20 feet, and the shots are fired within a few seconds. Practice this from different distances until you become consistent. And then once you become consistent, continue to practice. Now, those are not precise shots, nor are they intended to be, but they are effective shots, and they will incapacitate. This is why it's referred to as combat accuracy. The truth is that in close quarters combat situations, precision is out the window anyway. Range shooting is one thing, combat shooting in real life is something else entirely. Hits inside of the paper plate represents the center of mass size of a torso, where most vital organs are clustered. Landing shots here are as good as you're going to be able to do in a real-life deadly situation anyway. You certainly won't be able to intentionally hit a target the size of a 3x5 index card, so why not just practice for realities? All right, these 5 training points are just something for you to think about. Decide for yourself which ones are beneficial to you and which ones may not be. All I can do is bring them to your attention. I don't claim to be an expert, but I did survive a deadly force shooting back in 1991, so I do speak with some experience. All right, well, that's all for now, and thanks for watching. I'm Antonius, and I'm always shooting it straight. Ciao.